This video was paid for by my subscribers on Patreon, Substack, and backed by whose names you can see on screen right now. Thank you so much. This is anime that need live-action adaptations. A lot of anime and manga really didn't need to be adapted into live action, and a lot more of them have been than most of you probably realize, going all the way back to the 50-episode Astro Boy TV show, which predated even the anime. Plenty of excellent manga adaptations have aired over the decades, the ever-popular reinterpretations of long-form romantic comedies and contemporary dramas on Japanese and Korean TV, for instance, and feature films from the Lone Wolf and Cub series of the 70s to the Rurouni Kenshin series of the 2010s. But there have also been a litany of horrid flops, which soured a lot of audiences to the entire idea of adapting anime and manga stories into live action. In the 90s and 2000s, audiences were still begging for a live-action Evangelion movie. No one yet knew how bad a live-action Cowboy Bebop could go, and some of my favorite manga adaptations, like Hideaki Anno's Cutie Honey film, were created. And nowadays, adaptations ranging massively in quality are becoming increasingly commonplace, from Netflix bringing us live-action takes on One Piece and Yu Yu Hakusho, to Hollywood having done the Battle Angel Alita and Detective Pikachu movies before COVID killed movies, all of those crazy-ass Takashi Miike anime adaptations over the last 20 years, and so much more. But even still, that's a drop in the bucket compared to all the anime and manga that exists, and I think there's plenty of exploitable intellectual property just waiting to be reinvented out there. So here's my list of demands. K. Yes, the anime franchise that is just called K. This show is just about cool-looking dudes flashing around cool swords in the streets of Tokyo, and I don't think it does anything that live action couldn't replicate with even more charm. I think real actors with some charisma could bring all these badass characters to life even more than the limited expressions of the anime series, and even copying the dynamic visual presentation of the anime might look just as cool in live action as it does in animation, because it's mostly the result of visual post-processing effects and unique shot framing anyways. Volcano High is probably the best example of a movie that looks how I would imagine K would look in live action, and it was kind of cool. Ghost in the Shell. Yes, I know the live-action movie was controversial, but that's partly for being mid and a too far from canonical take on the story, and partly for the time and place controversy of Scarlett Johansson being cast to play Motoko Kusanagi. But there's no reason to think this couldn't have been done better, and there really hasn't been a great anime attached to the franchise in a long time either, so there's a huge void here waiting to be filled. There must be an actually good sci-fi writer sitting on a Ghost in the Shell script somewhere out there. Find it, print it, ship it, fax it, get that shit out there. Nazca of the Valley of the Wind. Okay, hear me out, right? So Miyazaki tragically kicks the bucket, right? And then, hold on, don't click away yet. Okay, so James Cameron. Wait, hold on. The manga is the storyboard, all right? And it's longer than The Hobbit. I'm going to hell for this. Kara no Kyokai. I don't know if this would actually work, but imagine a live-action version of this with the visual presentation of Let the Right One In. I would be really interested to see who could play these characters and how they'd be interpreted, but it's hard to imagine this happening given the audience for this show. Oh, and fuck it, Fate Zero. Do that with some really good actors and you've got some decent imitation HBO. Stop Hibari-kun. I think this show could easily be modernized to come off as less problematic to its own prospective modern audience. It's a show about a guy falling in love with a trans girl and basically coming to terms with that, while her dad comes to terms with the fact that no matter how much he protests, his daughter is not changing. If you could find the right charismatic trans actress to play Hibari-kun, reduce the already light raunchiness of the series, tighten in on the transphobia, and let the main romance progress more quickly while the dad remains the antagonist, and I think this could easily become a strong, acceptance-boosting youth rom-com. Shiki. This anime is based on a manga based on a novel by the same author as The 12 Kingdoms, which is based on a novel by Stephen King called Salem's Lot, which itself has already been adapted into live action. The Shiki manga has a really weird art style which was copied over into the anime series, and while I personally think it adds to the weird vibe of the story, it is unquestionably off-putting compared to the incredibly tightly written horror script, which in a good live-action adaptation, I think could fuck people up harder than The Walking Dead ever even dared to try. Steins Gate. I'm honestly surprised this hasn't already happened, just because it seems like it would be so easy to do on such a tight budget. The plot of this show could be reduced into an 8-episode miniseries of 45-minute episodes with no effort, and it would only lose scenes that shouldn't have ever been there in the first place. It's so easy to do, it seems obvious. Humanity has declined. This is another show with a weird art style that kind of boosts the vibe of the show, but also isn't as broadly appealing as its tight, surreal sci-fi writing is, which reads like an anime-fied Twilight Zone series. I don't think this is on enough people's radars for the IP to look juicy to investors, and I'm also sure that some of these stories wouldn't be nearly as adaptable into live action as they are into animation, but I also think that any attempt made to create these images juxtaposed against real actors would be absolutely hilarious. Baby Steps. One of the best sports manga of all time, which was canceled without conclusion. The anime adaptation went 50 episodes, but was kind of ugly and never really took off in the way that Haikyuu or Kuroko no Basket did with their gorgeous production IG adaptations. The story of this manga is so good that it easily shone through the quality of the anime for anybody who watched it, but it was hard to argue that the thing looked attractive. Put this thing in real life and give it even a middling budget, and it'll probably go over better than the anime did. Just imagine if it was good enough to get the manga resurrected. One can dream. Barakamon. This is one of the funniest single seasons of super accessible anime out there, and I've still got no idea why the anime swerved and adapted the mediocre prequel manga next instead of continuing the story, but we never got more of it. It probably would be hard to find a child actor who could capture the raw energy of the main little girl, which might be why this has never happened, considering just how down-to-earth the story and dialogue mostly are. But if they ever did find someone, I think this could still easily be modernized and retold today. Technolize. Can you even imagine how goddamn intense it would be? I'm not going to get into describing one of the most art house sci-fi anime out there. If you want to suffer psychological pain from anime, check it out. As much as the art style defines the atmosphere of the anime series, I think the script of this show could be tightened up into something really impactful in live action if someone took an equally absurd approach to realizing it. X 1999. Clamp created this series about 14 superpowered people on two sides of an apocalyptic war over the course of the 90s, and they never finished it. Rintaro's insane art house film adaptation gave the story a memorable ending, and Madhouse also took a hack at adapting it into a TV show, but I don't think the potential of this story has really been fully realized yet. Clamp's art style is so defining that it's understandable to think that their work translates best to animation, but I think this story is most interesting for its framework and its concept, and it could be realized better with a new script and real actors, especially with a visual style like the Netflix Sandman show. Jin-roh the Wolf Brigade. This movie already has a hyper-realistic style, and it's part of a series of adaptations which already has other incarnations in live action. I haven't seen those movies, and I love the Jin-roh film as it is, so it's not that I think it could necessarily be done better in live action. However, it's another case in which the script can easily be re-realized and captured in a uniquely interesting way by the right director. Obviously, with a lot of these, I'm being overly hopeful about how good these adaptations would probably be, but this is my fantasy. Bakano. The light novel series is kind of a clusterfuck, and the anime series did a pretty great job of combining the first 4 novels into one coherent story with a satisfying ending. That said, the anime hasn't held up for me as much as I wish, thanks to stretching out a lot of pretty thin content to fill those 13 episodes. I think Bakano could be trimmed into a 120-minute script with real actors and would be incredibly badass as long as the regeneration effects looked decent. And lastly, Beastars but in fursuits! Come on! Come on! Alright, that's all the ideas I've got for now. Do you think these are terrible ideas, or would you watch them? What anime do you want to see in live action? Let me know in the comments, and never forget, anime forever. Yakumon's response, it's working. I'm annoyed. I want none of these to be made. And if I weren't a long-time viewer, I would argue about this in the comments. That's hilarious.